Okay, let's unpack this. Renewable energy is absolutely booming, right? Think wind turbines stretching across the landscape, solar farms, soaking up the sun. It's incredible physical infrastructure generating clean power.
It really is.
But behind all of that, there's this invisible force that's becoming utterly essential for making it all work efficiently. Data. Huge amounts of data.
And it's not just passive data either. It's like massive constant streams of information, stuff coming from sensors, meters, weather patterns, market prices.
Yeah.
Managing and truly understanding that requires something pretty sophisticated. It requires big data analytics, or BDA.
Exactly. But how is this really powerful technology actually being adopted and used, on the ground, specifically in the UK renewable energy sector?
Right.
That's the core question for this deep dive. We've been digging into a really interesting source. It's a research study based on in-depth interviews with the people who are living and breathing this stuff every single day in the industry. And our mission today is really to cut through maybe some of the academic language and just pull out the most important insights from these interviews.
Yeah.
We want to understand the real opportunities and, crucially, the real challenges of using BDA in this vital sector. The goal, to get you well-informed, fast.
And just to set the stage, the study offers a surprising finding right off the bat.
Oh.
Yeah, despite how critical the energy sector is for, everyone's well-being and, societal advancement, the source material notes that old-fashioned approaches to analytics for organizational processes are currently applied widely within the energy sector.
Which is quite a statement, isn't it?
It really is.
It immediately tells you there's this significant potential for transformation here that just hasn't been fully unlocked yet.
So let's start with the absolute basics then, for anyone maybe new to the concept. What exactly do we mean when we talk about big data and big data analytics?
Okay. So at its heart, big data, or BD, is usually described by the V's: volume, variety, and velocity.
The V's, right? Yeah. Volume, because it's about data sets so large they just can't be handled by traditional tools. Variety, because this data comes from incredibly diverse sources. Yes, sensors on equipment, but also potentially everything from customer interactions, weather feeds, even like social media or unstructured documents.
Wow. Okay.
And velocity, because this data is often being generated and collected continuously, sometimes in real time. It's huge, it's often messy, and it's fast.
Right. So we're way beyond just giant spreadsheets living on a single computer here.
Definitely.
And then BDA is how you actually make sense of all that.
Precisely. Big data analytics is the capability to derive meaningful insight from that big data. It uses advanced techniques like statistics, mathematical modeling, and machine learning, that's ML, to find hidden patterns, predict outcomes, and optimize processes that humans simply couldn't do manually with that kind of scale and speed. It helps organizations make smarter, data-driven decisions.
And this is becoming increasingly relevant because, as the source highlights, the sheer amount of digital data globally is just exploding. Didn't IDC predict something like 175 zettabytes by 2025?
Something staggering like that, yeah. So incorporating analytics directly into business strategy is, it's quickly becoming the standard practice across industries.
Yeah.
And data is already absolutely fundamental in the energy sector. It flows from sensors on turbines across transmission networks through cloud communication systems.
Sure.
And as renewables grow, bringing more variability based on weather and time of day, the demand for sophisticated analytics to manage that complexity only escalates.
Research has certainly explored the theoretical potential of BDA to tackle major energy challenges. Things like optimizing the smart grid, dynamically managing energy demand from homes and businesses, improving the reliability of renewable sources that aren't always on.
Yeah, the potential's been discussed a lot. But as this study points out, there was kind of a key piece missing. We knew the potential, but we had less insight into how BDA is actually being adopted by companies in the renewable energy sector and, what specific real-world challenges they encounter on the ground. This study aimed to shed some light on that.
Which brings us to how they actually did that. How did the researchers go about getting these insights from the people working directly in the sector?
Well, they conducted what's called a qualitative field study using semi-structured interviews.
Okay.
Think of it like this. They didn't just send out a checkbox survey. They actually sat down for in-depth conversations with managers and experts, letting the participants share their experiences and perspectives in their own words, guided by a flexible set of questions.
So really getting into the nuance of what people thought and felt.
Exactly. The specific goal was to understand the perceptions of these practitioners, the managers, and the technical experts about the whole process of adopting BDA innovations.
And who exactly did they talk to get this picture? Was it a broad range?
Yeah, the sample included 8 participants based in the UK's renewable energy sector. And they represented a pretty good cross-section working in different areas like consultancy, solar power, energy efficiency, and even broader renewables covering wind, hydro, and electric vehicles.
Okay.
They also came from organizations of very different sizes, from small companies with just like 11 employees, all the way up to very large ones with over 10,000.
Wow, big range.
And their roles varied too, including analysts, engineers, project developers, and directors. This diversity is really key because it gives us a range of perspectives, from the small, agile startup to the larger, more established player.
That makes a lot of sense. Their experience with new tech like BDA would likely be very different depending on size and role.
For sure.
And once they had all these rich conversations, how did they process that qualitative data?
They used a technique called thematic analysis. This basically involves carefully reviewing the interview transcripts to identify recurring themes, ideas, or patterns in what people are saying.
Right.
And they guided this analysis using a pretty well-known framework for understanding how new things spread. The diffusion of innovations, or DOI theory.
Ah, DOI.
Yeah. This theory looks at factors influencing adoption, like how beneficial something is perceived to be, how complex it is, or, how well it fits with existing practices.
Got it. So using that framework, what did the managers and experts they interviewed see as the main opportunities or benefits that BDA could bring? What were the perceived advantages?
Okay, so this maps directly onto that DOI concept of relative advantage, essentially. How much better is BDA perceived to be compared to their existing methods?
Right.
And the participants highlighted several benefits.
And what was the most significant one, the one that came up again and again?
The single most common benefit managers pointed to was the ability to make more informed and quicker business decisions. 5 out of the 8 people we heard from highlighted this.
Wow, okay.
They noted that companies are swimming in data but often aren't using it effectively, and BDA helps by revealing trends and patterns across massive data sets that simply aren't visible otherwise. As one manager described it, it can lead to quicker and better decisions.
Makes sense.
Another even mentioned BDA being used in their HR department for candidate selection, which shows its potential application beyond just, energy flows.
That's a critical point. It's not just about the turbines, it's about optimizing the whole business. Okay, what was the next most frequently mentioned benefit then?
That was developing better trends and forecasts, particularly for customer or market profiles. 4 participants emphasized this. They felt BDA was crucial for understanding the market better, for building strategic business models, and ultimately for gaining a richer picture of their customers and their energy use patterns, which is, vital in a changing energy landscape.
Okay, so better internal decision-making and a clearer view of the market and customers. What were some of the other specific advantages they saw? Any other big ones?
Well, several mentioned BDA helping significantly with investment analysis.
Ah.
By analyzing historical data and trends, BDA can help predict the potential performance of new renewable energy projects, which is obviously key for securing funding and giving confidence to investors.
Commercial.
More effective pricing was also brought up, particularly useful in the context of energy storage. Knowing precisely when prices are likely to rise helps determine the optimal time to sell stored energy.
That real-time market intelligence must be incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. And the ability to leverage real-time data itself was cited as a direct benefit by 2 participants. It allows for a much more proactive and dynamic operational management and feedback, helping identify potential issues with assets or the grid before they become major problems.
Preventing problems before they happen, that's a clear cost saver and reliability booster right there.
Exactly. Other benefits included improved energy supply and demand management, which is especially tricky with variable renewables.
Yeah.
Also, critical peak loading calculations, understanding the likelihood of maximal power availability from solar or wind farms, which is essential for grid stability. Participants also saw benefits in high-quality data retrieval for historical analysis and improved metering insights, like analyzing the long-term performance and degradation of different solar panel technologies.
So it seems like even though some companies are still using these, old-fashioned methods, the people on the ground clearly see the diverse and significant benefits that BDA can bring, everything from high-level strategic planning down to fine-tuning the performance of individual assets.
Yes, that knowledge base about the potential benefits is definitely there among these practitioners. The study notes that, disseminating this knowledge more widely could help accelerate adoption across the sector.
Right. Now, let's shift from the exciting potential to the maybe more complicated current reality. How well is BDA actually fitting into these organizations' overall strategy right now?
This is where things get interesting. Most participants did see BDA as important, even a top priority for their companies.
Okay.
They felt it was driven by the competitive environment and the need for renewable energy firms to constantly evolve and adapt. As one participant, who represented a larger firm, put it, renewable energy firms are nimble and more tech-savvy, younger, so they are more used to building their resources from the ground up using the latest technology available.
That certainly paints a picture of a sector eager to embrace technology, but is that eagerness translating into full integration into their core strategy?
Not across the board, it seems, according to the study. Despite the stated importance, only 2 out of the 8 participants felt their organizations were fully transformed or truly accustomed to working with BDA at a fundamental level.
Okay, so the ambition is there, but the full organizational shift hasn't happened for most yet. What about the actual tools people are using day to day? What came up there?
This was quite telling, actually. Excel is still the most commonly mentioned tool among the participants.
Excel, of course.
Yeah. Its simplicity and flexibility are really appreciated, particularly by smaller businesses needing quick answers. One person even noted that clients are also familiar with Excel, which makes it easy to share data.
Just keeps showing up, doesn't it? The universal data tool.
It really does. But look, it's not just Excel. More advanced tools are being explored and used, especially in larger organizations or for specific complex tasks.
Like what?
Things like Python, MATLAB, Microsoft Power BI, and Tableau were mentioned for, optimizing solar power systems, visualizing large data sets, and more complex analysis.
So it's a bit of a hybrid landscape then, leveraging the familiar while cautiously exploring the more powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
How does this mix of ambition and reality fit into our diffusion of innovations framework?
Well, this connects pretty clearly to the concept of compatibility. While organizations perceive BDA as compatible with their strategic goals, they know they should use it and want to align with it. Achieving that full, seamless integration is proving difficult.
And why is that?
This challenge is partly linked to underlying infrastructure issues like inconsistent data quality stemming from maybe using lower-cost assets or just different types of monitoring equipment. That makes applying sophisticated BDA techniques much, much harder.
That makes perfect sense. If the data itself isn't standardized or reliable, even the most advanced tools are going to struggle to provide accurate insights. Okay, so we've covered the potential benefits and the strategic alignment challenges. What are the biggest hurdles people in the industry highlighted when it comes to adopting BDA?
Right. This brings us to the complexity aspect of DOI and, other significant barriers. The participants were quite frank about the difficulties.
And the most prominent ones. What was the biggest challenge people mentioned? Was there a clear winner?
There was. The single most significant challenge identified was educating employees and ensuring they have the necessary skills.
Oh, the skills gap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Several participants noted insufficient knowledge about BDA concepts and tools, along with the time and effort required to learn new skill sets. As one participant emphatically stated, that is the biggest hole, insufficient knowledge. Another added that it simply takes time to learn these new skill sets.
So it's not enough to just buy the technology. You need the people power and the knowledge to actually back it up.
Absolutely. And tied very closely to that, and the second most frequently mentioned challenge, was cost.
Right. Always a factor.
Significant expense involved, not only for the BDA tools and software licenses, with one participant calling a specific package very expensive, but also for hiring or training the skilled specialists needed to implement and run these systems.
Yeah.
As one person from a smaller company put it, cost. Unless you have specialists working in, but we're quite a small company, and we don't have a team dedicated to doing data analysis tasks. So yeah, it is expensive to do. The time required for training also adds to that overall expense.
So skills and budget are the major bottlenecks. That's probably a pretty common theme for adopting many new technologies, I'd imagine.
Very common.
What were some of the other significant challenges they brought up?
Well, another key challenge was ensuring that BDA is truly embedded at the core of the business strategy, rather than just being used, superficially.
Right.
The study calls this alignment to strategy, but participants framed it as a challenge of understanding that BDA is not just cosmetics. It needs to fundamentally change how the business operates to unlock its full potential.
It sounds like the difference between just having a fancy dashboard versus fundamentally changing your decision-making processes based on the data.
Exactly that.
Right.
Resistance to change, either from individuals or maybe the organizational culture itself, was also mentioned as a factor.
Mm-hmm.
And a significant technical hurdle was dealing with the flexibility required for data variety and a lack of standards in the sector. Participants highlighted the difficulty of integrating data from many different types of technologies, measuring equipment and data loggers into a consistent, usable format.
Yeah, that sounds messy.
Very. One participant noted that there's a lack of standards in the renewable energy space since it's been built from the ground up. Growing industry, which requires more standards.
That fragmented data landscape must create a lot of friction for analytics.
It absolutely does.
Right.
Other challenges included a lack of clear or standardized performance indicators across the industry, meaning different methods of calculation can yield different results for the same metric.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah. And simply the sheer variety of software tools available, which can make choosing the right one feel overwhelming for some companies.
It also sounds like there's this fundamental difficulty in moving from the stage of, okay, we have data,
Yeah.
to we actually know how to use this data effectively.
The study definitely points to this struggle. Organizations know they are collecting data, but many struggle to operationalize it or integrate it properly into their workflows. One participant shared a really striking example. Firms sometimes even delete potentially useful historical data because they just lack the storage capacity or the internal knowledge on how to analyze and leverage it.
Deleting useful data. Wow, that's a powerful and slightly heartbreaking illustration of this gap between data collection and actual insight.
It really highlights the scale of the challenge, doesn't it? Now, here's a genuinely surprising finding among the challenges they didn't mention.
Oh, what was missing?
Unlike studies in many other industries where it's often a major point of concern, privacy and security issues were not brought up as main barriers by the participants in this particular study.
That is counterintuitive, especially considering the potential sensitivity of energy consumption data or maybe operational data for critical infrastructure.
Yeah, you'd think so. The study's authors suggest this might be precisely because these organizations are still in the relatively early stages of BDA adoption. They're still grappling with the more foundational hurdles like skills, cost, and data integration
Right.
before they fully confront the more advanced risks related to privacy and security.
That's a fascinating possibility. It suggests where they are on their BDA journey kind of dictates which challenges feel most immediate and pressing right now.
Exactly. It gives us a really interesting snapshot of the current priorities and struggles.
So let's try and pull this all together now and look at it through the lens of that diffusion of innovations theory we started with. How does it all map out?
Okay, so the analysis concerns that relative advantage, that clear perception of BDA's benefits, is the primary factor driving managers' interest and motivation to adopt BDA in this sector. They definitely see the value it offers.
Okay, so the why is clear. But compatibility, how well BDA actually fits into existing strategic goals and infrastructure, that's still a significant hurdle, right?
Yes. While organizations want it to align, achieving that full integration is difficult, leading to those issues we talk about, like inconsistent data quality that hinder implementation.
And complexity is strongly validated as a major barrier.
Absolutely. The study clearly shows this is primarily tied to the substantial costs of BDA solutions and, crucially, the significant need for educating employees and developing new skill sets.
What about the other DOI factor, trialability? Did the idea of trying out BDA on a smaller scale before a full commitment come up much?
Yes, it did. And this was interesting. The findings here didn't entirely match some previous literature that suggested trialability might be a lower priority for BDA adoption.
Oh, how so?
These interviews show that managers actually see trials as quite important. They view them as a way to manage the potential disruptive changes to operations that implementing new systems can cause.
Right, makes sense.
And to help improve the eventual adoption success.
And how would trials help with that disruption specifically?
Well, by allowing the organization and its people to gain hands-on experience. As one participant discussed in the context of their team's approach, trials offer an opportunity to develop necessary internal resources, like training manuals, and frequently asked questions, FAQs, helping smooth the transition for everyone involved.
So it's not just testing the tech itself, but also kind of preparing the human side of the organization for the change. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. The study also examined how organizational factors play a role, specifically looking at company size.
And was there a correlation between company size and how far along they were with BDA adoption?
Generally, yes. The study found that larger organizations in their sample were more likely to have already adopted more advanced analytics compared to the smaller ones.
Okay.
This aligns with broader research suggesting that larger size is often positively related to the rate of technology adoption, likely because, well, bigger companies tend to have more capital available for significant investments in expensive tools and specialists.
That feels pretty intuitive. BDA isn't cheap. Although you did mention earlier one smaller company had adopted advanced analytics despite having fewer decision makers, which I guess shows it's not a strict rule.
Right.
But the overall trend is towards larger companies being further ahead.
Correct. There are always nuances and exceptions, but the overall pattern observed in this study and supported by wider literature points to size being a contributing factor.
So let's distill this down then. What are the key practical takeaways for someone listening, whether they work in renewables, are interested in the energy transition, or maybe just care about how new technologies actually get implemented in the real world?
Okay, the study offers a few clear implications, particularly for managers who might be considering BDA. First, really understand and leverage the relative advantage. To justify the investment, you need to clearly articulate and demonstrate the specific, tangible benefits BDA will bring: sharper decision-making, more accurate forecasting, improved investment analysis. Show the value proposition up front.
Makes total sense. Speak their language. Show them the return on investment, basically.
Exactly. Second, be realistic about the balance between compatibility and complexity.
Okay.
Acknowledge the complexity, the significant costs, both for software and skilled people, and the time needed for training. And critically, ensure that BDA isn't just sort of bolted onto your existing system.
Right.
It needs to be deeply integrated into the core of your business strategy. Failing to do this, perhaps by not investing in the necessary infrastructure to handle varied data, can lead to fundamental issues like data inconsistency that just cripple your analytics efforts later on.
Don't just buy the tools. Build the foundation they actually need to work on.
Precisely.
Okay.
And third, recognize that trialability is more important than some might assume. Don't underestimate the impact of implementation on day-to-day operations.
Good point.
Plan for appropriate trial periods and invest in developing internal support resources like training manuals and FAQs. This helps manage the operational disruption and significantly contributes to more successful long-term integration.
So it's really about proving the value, being eyes wide open about the difficulties, and planning the rollout carefully with the human element very much in mind.
It's a good summary, yeah. The findings really encourage organizations to do an honest assessment of their readiness and their commitment to truly embedding BDA into their operational DNA for sustained success.
This has been a really insightful deep dive into the real-world dynamics of BDA adoption in the UK renewable energy sector. We've defined the terms, heard from the ground about the promising opportunities and the, frankly, significant hurdles they face, and viewed it all through that helpful lens of how new technology spread within organizations.
And while this specific study had its limitations, focusing just on the UK, a relatively small sample size suggesting avenues for future research into specific subsectors or maybe using quantitative methods.
Yeah, definitely.
Gives us a clear picture of the journey many organizations in this crucial space are navigating right now.
And it leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Given the clear, exciting potential of BDA to dramatically improve the efficiency and sustainability of renewable energy, everything from better predicting supply to optimizing investments, but also acknowledging the significant tangible hurdles like cost, the need for extensive employee training, and the challenge of integrating wildly diverse data sources. How might different organizations, perhaps depending on their size, their existing infrastructure, or the specific data problems they're trying to solve, prioritize these factors differently?
And maybe more broadly, what does this tension between obvious potential benefits and considerable implementation complexity tell us about the adoption curve of any powerful new technology? What does it truly take for a promising innovation to cross that gap from potential to integrated reality? Something to mull on.